Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Mike Desjardins, who's the founder and CEO of Verdus, a company which is helping large organizations to develop the leadership of their executives. We're going to talk about what is needed in a leader today, and we're going to talk about what is coming for organization and the culture that they want to implement. Enjoy my conversation with Mike. Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Business of Meeting podcast. And today, I'm delighted to speak with a great friend who is an amazing developer and leaders, and he's created a company called Verdus. They are doing leadership development. They're working with large corporations, but more importantly, Mike Desjardins has been an observer of culture, of company culture, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Yeah, absolutely, Eric. It's a pleasure.
So for the record, we just tried to get into this Zoom thing, and I thought it was something between the border between Canada and the US, but not at all, right?
Yeah, it's like I've never seen Zoom actually have an outage as large as what happened this morning when we were supposed to start recording this, but thankfully it got resolved and we're here.
Absolutely. Now, we have a lot of things in common. We met thanks to MMT. We're both EO members. Mm-hmm. And right. So you are a true entrepreneur, which means that you have experienced the roller coaster of the entrepreneurial life. So before we get into the topic of today, can you share a little bit about your own journey to inspire people who are thinking of starting their own company?
Sure. I mean, the beginning of this for me was quite odd in that I had was in university, and in second year, a company came and offered to pay the rest of my way through business school if I worked for them when I graduated. And that had turned out to be a 10-year journey that led me to being president of the second largest division of that company. And I'd set a set of goals for myself when I was 18, when I signed that deal. And it were goals I wanted to achieve by the time I was 30. And I hit them all, the 10 goals, by the time I guess I just turned 26. And I had this recognition that on paper, my life looked great, but the reality of my life was something else. I didn't actually like the life I'd created, but I'd gotten everything I always wanted. So how do you get everything, how do I get everything I want, but then don't like the life that it created? And it kind of sent me on this personal exploration over about a year and a half of trying to figure out, well, if this isn't it, then what is it? And it eventually led to me writing down a list of 15 things, the 15 things my life was going to have in it. I was going to walk to work. I was going to work with people I trust and respect. I was going to do things that help my own personal development and learning and growth. I was going to live downtown Vancouver. I was only going to fly for fun for work. And at the time I was flying usually around 3 weeks a month for work. I was going to hold down a relationship. I was going to see my family. The things that I think a lot of people just take for granted happen. But when you're growing a company, we were across Canada in 26 states, and I was on a plane all the time throughout North America, meeting with customers, working with sales agents to support the growth of this business. And it was, financially, it was great for me to be doing that, but it had a very heavy price on the other side. So through that exploration, the last thing I thought I would do is get engaged in a startup. That was not in the cards at all. I was looking at doing another president, sort of CEO or managing director role, and with equity attached to it. And I got this opportunity to do a startup. And so I quit my job on September 1st of 2000, September 1st of 2000. And I remember sitting with the owner and his wife of the company I was working for at the time. And, their kids weren't involved in the business. And I was technically the heir apparent to take over as CEO of the whole thing. And here I was after 10 years with them supporting me in schooling and giving me all these great opportunities. Here I am resigning to really go to a very uncertain future with respect to doing an entrepreneurial startup. And so that's what I ended up doing. There were 4 partners in the beginning. And that was in 2000, October 1st of 2000 is when the business started. And then I bought out 2 of them in 2003. And the last partner I bought out he left in 2007. I bought him out in 2008. And the original business was actually in developing leaders in peer groups, very similar to like a YPO, EO, Vistage, tech type model. And when I was on the plane to Toronto to work with the 5 groups that we had there, knowing that I was flying home and getting on a plane to go to Seattle to work on getting the first groups going up in Seattle when we already had 16 running in Vancouver, I suddenly realized I was replicating the life that I had just gotten away from. And that if I wanted to grow this business across North America, I was the one who was going to be traveling and setting this thing up. I'm like, this is not what I want to do. So what was about 10% of our revenue at the time was leadership development. This is back in 2006. So I wrote a Rockefeller Habits plan. And those of you who are watching this or familiar with EO will know a lot about, say, EOS traction. Well, the predecessor to that is called Rockefeller Habits. And I wrote a plan, brought it to my last business partner and said, hey, I think we should go after what's 10% of our revenue. And we should let go of the business that's 90% of our revenue, because I think that's a much better business model. And I think we can grow here and expand without me having to be traveling so much. And he's like, well, I don't really understand that business that you want to be in, but I trust that this is the right thing to do. So yeah, let's go do this. And we got into 2007. He's like, I don't understand this business at all. I know how to facilitate a group and do that sort of thing, but this whole leadership development in large organizations, that's just not my history, not my understanding. And so he'd also fallen out of favor with the team in the company. And so I said, okay, well, what do you want? He's like, buy me out. So I bought him out, and that was March of 2008. And, it was kind of a messy process to get him out of the business. And then September 2008 happens and the world falls apart and we have a recession. So in the midst of converting our revenue over, we were 30% the new business and 70% the old business. And so we lost half our revenue going into September of 2008. So now I'm staring at this business, which I'm not firmly implanted in the new business. I've stopped doing business development, or we've stopped doing business development for the old business, which was really driving the whole thing. And we're half our revenue. So, really went from there through this soul searching of like, well, I know this is the right thing. I know leadership development and a small part working to help build company strategies as well, because same executive teams, if we're developing an executive team, is the right thing to do, but I got to survive. And it came down to September of 2009. And I turned to was she my fiance at the time? My fiance at the time, who's now my wife, and said to her, like, I'm going to give this thing 4 months. And I said the same thing to my EO forum group. Like, if I can't figure out how to get this thing to work in a time where nobody's got budget, and I'm trying to convince people to leadership development, but we're still in recession at that point, I'm just going to shut it down on December 31st. And my fiance at the time is like, well, I have my apartment that I'm not living in because we're living together at the time. Why don't we sell that? And we could use that money to get us out of this hole. And then we can just figure out what's next. So at that point, I knew I'd picked the right person to ask to marry me.
Yes.
Well, I already knew that, but that was definitely confirmation. And so I gave it 4 months, and I got down to around the 20th of December, and I didn't have payroll for Christmas Day, which was coming up in 5 days. And I'm like, I guess it's done, because I am, $365,000 in debt at this point. I don't have any more borrowing power. So unless I start to sell my house, that's the next thing I could do to try to keep this thing going. And on December 20th, I got a call from a utility company, a gas and electric company here in British Columbia. And they said, we've got some work we want you to do in 2010.
But we days before your deadline.
Yeah, 5 days before. And they said, we have this work we need done in 2010, but we have budget left over from 2009, and we're in a use it or lose it scenario as the utility. So if we don't spend the money this year, it reduces our money for next year, because our budget will be lower next year. Any chance you can pre-invoice us for the work you're going to do next year now, but the deal is it has to hit your bank account on December 24th, or we can't send you the money. So
that's yes. When you say, well, let me think about it.
Yeah, can I get back to you? So then December 24th, the money arrives in the account. I pay payroll. There was like $6,000 from that check left. But we were also talking to the largest telecommunications company in Canada, TELUS, which is like Verizon would be in the US. And we were chatting with them. We were chatting with one of the largest restaurant groups in Canada as well. And I said, I feel like the winds are finally behind our sails here. And so we kept going, didn't shut the company down, and then landed 5 of the biggest brands we could possibly land that put us on the map. And we pretty much leveraged those 5 brands to get every other company. So we had, gas and electric utility. We had largest telecom in Canada, one of the largest and most successful restaurant groups in Canada. We got the hydroelectric utility, and it just kind of went from there. And that allowed us to really do the work that we love and have been focused on for the last 10 years, which has been developing leaders with a firm grounding in emotional intelligence, from CEOs and executives to VPs, directors, managers, and high potential leaders. We do something very different at all those levels. And now our clients, they typically are 100 million in revenue and larger. The average is closer to $1 billion in revenue, and they are spread out across North America. And we get to do this work we love that helps align with, we're a B Corp as well. So that's a huge part of how we operate as a business. Yep. And all of this aligns with our purpose, which is to make a difference in the lives of others by building respectful, empathetic, and productive leaders who are aware of their impact on the world. And our goal, our long-term BHAG, is to have a Virtus leader in every company. And so that's why we got to grow. That's really the reason that providing great opportunities for the team here and meeting our purpose and meeting our BHAG are the reasons that we're currently scaling. All right, that's a lot of, I know your original question was, tell me how you got into this. But
no.
To give you the kind of story or the history of this work, it's been a labor of love and passion for 22 years. I feel super lucky to do what I get to do every day. And I work with the most amazing, emotionally intelligent, thoughtful, intelligent, creative, strategic thinkers. That's who I hang out with all day long. So it's like winning the lottery from that perspective.
If only you were passionate about what you do, that would be great.
Right?
That's awesome. Mike, you said something that triggered a question in my mind. I'm so admirative of people like you that could say 10% of our revenue is exactly what we should be focusing on for the future. As you say that you're looking at it at the beginning, but how did you get to that point? How do you get to that conclusion when you're sitting down, you're taking time to reflect, and then you come back to your business partners that that's what we should be doing, I know. How do you reach that point?
It was a little bit canary in the coal mine, to use the example of, when there's some signs that are telling you that is the direction. When we were doing the groups, I would have to convince each individual CEO, 12 of them, individually, that this was going to be a good thing for them to come into a group and charge them $6,000 each to join this group per year. And then each group required that. And a lot of them didn't want to meet with anybody that was in sales in the company. They wanted to meet with me directly. They're like, I'm a CEO. I would like to meet with the CEO if I'm going to consider doing this. Well, then I go into a CEO's office and I start talking about his business or her business. And that person says to me, oh yeah, we'd really like your help with strategic planning. We need some leadership development. And they're prepared to spend $350,000 with us.
Okay.
I'm like, wait, so I can talk to the same CEO and convince that person to go into a peer group for $6,000, or I can have a conversation about the business. So all of a sudden I'm looking at the value equation, and the minimum, at the time, the minimum contract that we would look at would have been, it's a lot smaller than today, but back then it was $35,000. So I'm like, I get a 6 times multiple by walking into that CEO's office if I don't get him in one of my groups. And I focus the conversation on how to make his or her business or their business better. And so that was where I realized, this could be a way easier business to grow. And I'm not trying to serve the individual needs of CEOs. We have run CEO, executive, and senior manager groups. So 3 different levels. But it really is a very fundamentally different model. And you're also not getting there's a leverage factor to working with a whole company in the work that we do. Whereas when we work with an individual CEO, they have to create the leverage by going, so with EO, you learn something great in your EO forum and you want to take it into your business. Well, you got to go convince everybody about the thing you just learned in your forum that this is a good idea for the business. And if they say no, it's done. But if we work with the people in your business and we talk about what that great idea looks like and they get excited and engaged about it and they go implement it, that's a way easier leverage point for us as an organization to be able to create marked change. But it was also done out of a personal need that I had committed to myself that I was going to grow a great life while I grew a great business. And then I wasn't going to sacrifice my life the way that I did in my prior career to have financial success. And I said, I want to be successful and have financial success, but I want to do it in a way that allows me to live a great life at the same time. And I had a very personal example that I don't talk a lot about unless somebody's in this same scenario. But my father was a trained accountant, became a CFO, then became the CEO of a company. He and his business partners sold their business when my dad was 50. And so at that point, he had enough money that he could just retire. Part of the deal was he had to stay as CEO, go from CFO to CEO for 2 years, and then stay on the board of directors for 2 years. So he's like, great, I'll do that. And then he's like, when I turn 54, I'm going to, he had been in a Vistage group for a tech group for 11 years. Like, I'm going to become a chair of the group. So finishes board of directors, becomes a chair for the group, and starts calling me and asking me how to send attachments on emails or how something works in his car. And I'm like, I thought he was joking at first because he's a very intelligent person asking me very simple questions. And I called my mom and I'm like, Dad keeps calling me at the office and asking me things that like are very straightforward. We were driving to his 54th birthday and I noticed he was going 40 kilometers an hour, around 25 miles an hour on a street where everybody else was driving somewhere around 45 to 50 miles an hour. And we're just getting past and people are honking at us. And I'm like, Dad, what are you doing? Like, why are you driving so slow? He's like, I'm going as fast as I can. I don't understand. Like, and I talked to my mom after that. I'm like, something's not right. So all of that led to a series of testing. And finally, not until he was 56 did we realize that he has Parkinson's and a form of dementia called Lewy body dementia. And so, I was, my dad was 56, I was 26. So this is right around the same time that I was burning out in my career before doing this business, that I realized that, if I go the same route that my dad's going, like he's going to decline. So he died at 63 of complications from Lewy body dementia. But at 26, I'm like, look at this life I've created where I don't travel. I never take vacation. I'm gone all the time. I don't really have a life. I have work. And I just watched my dad go down that direction of building a great company and, being able to retire with money. And my mom and him were supposed to travel, but now they can't. And so I'm like, I'm not going to do that. So a big part of the decision around this business to build a great life was recognizing that happens to me too. Then I got to make sure I have an awesome life along the way, because I might not get that retirement that a lot of people work towards. And I'm 50 now, like I turned 50 this year. So when I did, it really brought a lot of emotions up for me around, am I making the right decisions for my 10-year-old daughter, for my wife, like around how I'm showing up for them. I don't know how much longer I have. So, and I'm not suggesting I'm going to get the same thing that my dad had, but things happen in life. Yes. And so it's been a key part of my personal wellness and commitment to taking care of myself. But then equivalently, I want that same thing for everybody in the company. I don't want people burning out. I want people being paid well and being paid equitably, and at the same time, living a great life and being able to look back on the journey and say, like, I got to do these really cool things with these wonderful people and look at all the good that we did. That's what we're trying to do here.
How do you make sure the people working with you do have that balance and do have that mental health? Are you switching off the emails in the weekend? Are you forcing them to take holidays? What are concrete stuff that you're applying?
Yeah, so like a number of things. So I'll talk about holidays because you mentioned that first. So we started off by a long time ago giving the weekend and around Christmas is Hanukkah is flexible, obviously, as you know, in terms of when that actually shows up. Christmas shows up at the same time every year, so it makes it a little bit easier. So that week of what we call the holiday season, we've always given that off on top of everybody's normal allotment of vacation. And we also have a sort of a use it or lose it policy, which is like, you have to take your vacation. So it's not an option to not take your vacation. You have to take it. And, the way the rules work in Canada, technically there is a financial obligation to pay it out. But we're like, no, we don't want you to pay out. We want you to go away and enjoy yourself. Because we've been running a virtual business for the last 13 years, we also have very interesting things happen, like what happened in the last 2 weeks, which is Sasha, who is our logistics coordinator, said, hey, I'm going to go to Aruba, pretty sure it was Aruba, for 2 weeks. The first week I'm going to go on vacation. And the second week, I'm going to work from Aruba. And we're all like, man, great. Sounds great. Because we're spread out. My director of people and operations, Nadia, is in Montreal. I've had people living in New York, Toronto, Montreal, like all over the place, right? And as a virtual business for the past 13 years, we have that flexibility of people being able to work where they want. We ask people to work a normal 8-hour day during the week. There are times in this business where things get busier and that can get extended, but we try to keep that during the week. We don't have any expectation that people will reply to emails after 5:30 in their time zone or before 8 o'clock in their time zone. And we have no expectation of people working on the weekends. And so that includes Slack messages. So we ask people to use the scheduling feature on email and the scheduling feature on Slack to schedule a reply or a note when it is an appropriate working hour.
Yeah.
Now, there are times when we slide off that because we're in a really busy time. But when we're not in as busy of a time, like in the summer, we give people half-day Fridays on top of that so that they get an opportunity to enjoy the weather because, Vancouver's amazing in the summer. Yeah. And so we look to provide the flexibility. The other thing I say to people is, listen, if you're going to go Christmas or Hanukkah shopping or whatever your holiday is during the holiday period of time, go during the week. Go on Monday from like 10 till 1. Nobody's in the mall. And you can breeze through there and do all your holiday shopping. If you need to get a haircut appointment, 9 o'clock on Monday, 9 o'clock on Tuesday, you can get a haircut appointment. No problem. Because nobody wants those appointments. So it provides the flexibility. And then we're not monitoring people's hours. Like it's like, work around it, make up the time the way you want to make up the time so that it makes it work for you. But if you want to pick up and drop off your kids at school, like, great, that's perfect. That's one of the joys we have of doing the work the way that we do this work is this flexibility, and we trust you. So we're not going to ask you how you're going to make up the time. Well, that's not part of the conversation at all. You just make it work and get your job done. And we're all relying on each other. So we don't let each other down. There's a high level of accountability in this business, and that's what's made it work. If somebody isn't able to be highly accountable, then it doesn't work to work here, full stop.
So basically the accountability is what leads everything, not the hours that you are working.
Yeah, it's not the hours at all, actually, because it's the accountability. Now, we're asking for people to be available during certain core times so we can have meetings, right? So somebody said, I want to work from 8 till 4 in the morning. It's like, well, that doesn't work we can never hold a meeting. So, there is some sort of core hours that we're looking for. But because we're spanning, 3 different time zones with the work we do in North America, we've got people that are at work at 5 a.m. on the West Coast, but it's 8 o'clock for them in Toronto, but they're finishing at 2:30 or 3 o'clock in Vancouver. On the West Coast for East Coast, it's 5:30, right? So we have a core sort of hours during the day. We try to keep the meetings, and the rare times when there are meetings outside of that slot because of a time zone issue, it's an exception. The problem with exceptions is like we have to watch as a leadership team because it's really easy for an exception to become the new rule.
Right.
And one of the big challenges with culture, which is really hard for people to grasp. Most people think about culture as the things we talk about or say are happening in our company or what we would like to have happen. Equally, culture is the things we let slide.
Because it's become a habit.
Yeah. If we let it slide, we're saying it's okay here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then eventually it's just part of the culture. And so similarly, when we have exceptions, they need to be recognized as exceptions. And, it's easy to be the one person who's like, oh, I'm just going to fire off this email now to this person because they're not going to reply. Well, if I send it, what do you think the chances lie at night? Really high. But the problem is now that I am creating something where that other person will be like, well, okay, Mike's sending an email in the evening. It's okay if I send it. Like it creates a snowball effect, right?
I love it. Actually applying it. the send later function and Outlook is something that I'm using a lot.
Yeah.
I've always heard for years, people leave bad bosses. They don't leave companies. And obviously, the last 12 months or so, there's a tsunami of people leaving their organization. So is that just because there's so many bad bosses, or something completely fundamental has shifted in the last 2 years?
What's fundamentally shifted in the last 2 years is there's been, as a result of the pandemic, there has been an increased requirement for a deeper level of empathy by leaders. And if a leader is not empathizing with the realities of a person's physical and psychological safety with respect to the pandemic, or their working conditions, not all of us have the same home lives, then people will leave and go to a company that is more flexible, is more willing to support a work-life balance that we've all learned is possible in the last couple of years, that it's possible to work from home. And the argument from a culture perspective is, well, we need everybody back in the office because of culture. And well, it's just not true, because the reality is, like, we work with a lot of multinational companies that have offices all over the place. So they're not all in the same office. So is it that you can have culture in a company that has offices all over North America or the world? They technically have a different culture in every one of those places. So what's the difference? The other thing that's happened is that leaders have come to us and said, hey, so we have to go to the office 2 days a week. Okay. What happens in those 2 days when you're in the office? Well, not everybody's in the office on the same 2 days. So when I go to the office, I'm on Zoom calls with the people who aren't in the office on the same 2 days as me. So why am I in the office again? And it's quite common for there to be 20 to 30% of the people that used to be in the office. Now, this is definitely not equitable across all roles. If you work at a gas station, if you work at a coffee shop, if you're an Amazon delivery driver, you work for DoorDash, right? Like, you don't have the option to be calling in to work. So if we're talking about roles that are, office-based roles where you don't really need to go in to do the function of your job, you're not moving a thing from here to here or doing face-to-face customer service. So it's a percentage of the working population. And what we learned in the pandemic is that there is a way to do it differently. And I think a lot of leaders are hoping that it goes back, like, oh, I can't wait till it goes back and we're all back in the office again. And I'm like, the reality is that there's before March 2020 and there's after March 2020. We're not going back. If you, and you can quote me on this, and if you're watching this a year from now and you happen to have stumbled upon this podcast, it will be interesting to see if this prediction came true. But based on everything that we're seeing today, the world is going to be in a hoteling model permanently.
The world is, sorry, it's going to be what? I didn't hear.
The business world will be in a hoteling model. And what a hoteling model is that people will be able to come and go as they choose from offices that the company owns when they want to change an environment, or if their home environment isn't conducive to them being able to be productive, or if they want to collaborate and brainstorm. The expectation that they need to be 8 to 5 Monday to Friday or 9 to 5 Monday to Friday in a centralized office, that's done. And so some type of hybrid model that is flexible depending on the individual with empathy from their boss, I think is where we're landing. And the companies that don't are helping to support the grand resignation, which means there's some great people available on the market, right? But the talent market is also very tight right now too. Maybe that changes if there's a recession that happens next year, then maybe that will swing the other direction. But currently wages are going up. It's the number of job postings that we see that are dragging on 9, 10 months, a year, where those jobs should have been filled in the past or would have been filled in the past in 3 months. We're living in a very, very different talent market, and people are leaving complete industries. People are going in, like, I can't, like, if I was a flight attendant right now in an American-based airline, like the number of flight attendant related or passenger related incidents happening, particularly in US-based airlines in the past 2 years. Do you think a lot of people are going to watch that and think that's my next job opportunity? or I want to stay in this opportunity? Who wants to be harassed at work? Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think we're going to see a lot for different reasons, for some social and some for lifestyle reasons. We're going to see people changing occupations completely and looking to get into different lines of work. In particular, as well, also leaving companies that are not flexible and are basically have not realized that the world has changed and are trying to make it go back the way it used to be. But that's like effectively like pushing water uphill.
So, and I know that you asked me to protect your personal mental health, and you need time because you're back to back today, but still.
I am, and I need to eat lunch.
But
that's gracious of you to say that. Thank you.
I'm taking care of you, my friend. So I still want to ask you last question.
Yeah, please.
What are your kids going to tell about you in 10 years when it comes to be a leader and to have developed your company and have a Virtus leader in each company? How are you going to do that, and what is it going to look like?
Yeah, for me, I want for my daughter to be able to meet the people whose lives I've impacted and to have them tell her their story. That's what would be most meaningful to me, is not what I've accomplished or what I've created, but the difference that I've made in the lives of people as a result of the choice to do this. And I need to underscore the fact that this business is a village. Like, it's taken a village to do this. This is not about me. I happen to have a specific role that I play within the business. But from my daughter's perspective, I really want for her in her life to run into people who are like, oh, I got to be part of a Virtus program in my company, and this is what happened as a result. It already happens to her today, because we go to places and people recognize me and come up and say, oh, I'm so like, I've been promoted, or I'm in this new job in this new company. And like, the key part of it is a result of me getting this leadership development that you did at the company I used to work for. And my daughter is standing there listening to this. And yeah, I want that for her, because it'll mean that I will have, we as a company will have achieved the purpose that I referenced earlier, that we set out to achieve. And I'll feel proud of the heartbeats that I put, the return on my heartbeats. I'll feel very proud of that.
Awesome. Mike, thank you so much for taking time to speak with me today. And I can't wait to see you face to face anytime soon.
I look forward to it, Eric. Thanks so much for your time.
Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. Love the point you're making. And yes, indeed, it's a very interesting moment we're living. And we're going to see how companies and people are developing in the near future. If you want to connect with me, please reach out on LinkedIn or join my Facebook group, www.eventbusinessformula.com/group. And please share this episode with your network. Thank you. Bye-bye.